Good morning and welcome to Daybreak. I'm your host, Nadia Jani, and I'll be taking you through today's top stories. Here are the headlines. Russia and US agree to resume regular military dialogue after Abu Dhabi talks. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer apologises to Epstein victims over former politicians' lies. And Trump endorses Japan Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi ahead of Sunday elections. First, this morning, the US and Russia have agreed to re-establish high-level dialogue between their armed forces. The announcement comes after a meeting of senior US and Russian military officers in Abu Dhabi. President Donald Trump repeatedly voiced his desire to normalize relations between both countries. Here's the report.
The United States and Russia have agreed to resume regular military-to-military contact, re-establishing a channel that had been suspended since 2021. The agreement was reached during a meeting of senior US and Russian military officers in Abu Dhabi this week, held on the margins of discussions related to the war in Ukraine. In a statement, US-European Command said the renewed dialogue would provide consistent communication between the two armed forces to reduce the risk of miscalculation and unintended escalation. Military contacts between Washington and Moscow were stopped shortly before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Since then, incidents involving aircraft and drones have been reported near NATO airspace, as well as over the Black Sea and Syria. The announcement comes a day after the New START treaty expired on the 5th of February, ending the last legally binding limits on US and Russian strategic nuclear weapons. US President Donald Trump has said the United States should work toward a new arms control framework, while Russia has said it remains open to dialogue. Officials said the restored channel would allow regular communication between senior commanders.
Now let's take a look at the stories shaping the day across the globe. And we head first to our A News website. And here it's also stating that Russia and US to re-establish military-to-military communication. So as you just saw in our first report, the US and Russia have agreed to this very recently. This came after Ukraine talks in Abu Dhabi yesterday. We know that President Donald Trump says that he wants to normalize relations and communication between the two countries, saying that it will provide consistent military-to-military contact as parties work towards lasting peace. And this announcement came in the middle of reports that US-Russia were negotiating a deal to extend nuclear arms reduction treaty due to expire on Thursday. So it seems that these two countries have come into agreement and will continue having the dialogue needed in relation to military. And that's also running on the Washington Post. Russia to resume high-level military talks. Well, throughout the course of the week and the next coming weeks and months, we'll see exactly what this means. Right now, we just know they are conversing and probably will discuss other things like nuclear programs, security, threats to security, and other issues around military-to-military action, both in their own areas and across the globe. Okay, now we go to our next headline, and that is currently leading on the BBC website, and it says Starmer apologises to Epstein victims for believing Mandelson's lies. Now, we know that the Epstein files were released earlier this week by the US Justice Secretary Department, and from that we learned a number of things, including Mandelson, so Peter Mandelson, who was the former US ambassador, UK ambassador to the US, and has stepped down since that. He resigned when it first came out that this information was coming out against, and then he's resigned from the actual Labour Party as well, and the police investigation has opened up. Now, Mandelson isn't the only one that has been spoken about in regards to the contact with Epstein. There's a number of people, celebrities and key figures that have been highlighted in the documents that were released. But for the Mandelson's case, he has said that he acknowledges, Keir Starmer rather, acknowledges that he knew some of Mandelson's connections to the late Jeffrey Epstein, but none of us knew the depths and the darkness of that relationship, is what he was highlighting in this video that was posted today. But but his opposition party and many others are calling for a no confidence vote, and some people in his party are asking him to actually step down. Now, the British Prime Minister said that he regretted appointing Lord Mandelson and would not have done so if he'd known what he knows now in regards to his connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this information, this actual recording was shown to one of the victims who also saw this. Her name is Marina Lesada, and she said that she has to commend him for going on national television and admitting he was wrong and apologizing to us, which is remarkable that a survivor has said that in his message. In what Keir Starmer actually said, this is what he said: "I am sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry you have believed Mandelson's lies and appointed him, and sorry that even now you're forced to watch this story unfold in public once again." So we'll be following this story in relation to this. Mandelson actually hasn't commented further, but we do know that an investigation into his linkings with Jeffrey Epstein is currently ongoing. Okay, now we go to the next headline, which is on the Financial Times, and it is Donald Trump endorses Japan's Sanae Takaichi ahead of election. So we know that Japan is going to elections this Sunday. And Trump yesterday posted on his social media platform that he is happy and approves strongly. This is what he wrote. He said, she's already proven to be a strong, powerful and wise leader, one that truly loves her country, is what he said, and added she will not let the people of Japan down. So quite a positive endorsement for Prime Minister Takaichi. She currently is the first woman Prime Minister in Japan. However, she called another election so that she could actually get more seats in Parliament, so that she can put forward her fiscal policies without much opposition to that. She became Prime Minister in October 2025, and she called an election to seek a public mandate, as I just mentioned. Takaichi has actually described Trump as a partner in a new golden era and praised his role in bringing peace to the Middle East. So we will definitely be covering the story as to how the elections unfold on Sunday for Japan. And very quickly, we go to the next story, which is currently on Deutsche website DW. So rains pummel Spain, Portugal, leaving 1 dead and 1 missing. So Spain and Portugal has received severe disruption because of the floods on Thursday due to torrential rain and flooding and landslides by Storm Leonardo. Pictures show how people are trying their best to stay dry, get out of the rain. But it's the 7th storm to hit the Iberian Peninsula this year. And last week, 5 people died and hundreds were injured, and tens of thousands were left without electricity in Portugal. They're saying that rising global temperatures due to human-driven climate change means floods and extreme weather events in Europe are becoming more and more frequent. Along with that, Spain's National Weather Agency has lifted the highest alert for the south of the country, as well as Portugal's National Weather Agency has done the same thing, and said in January was their second wettest January since 2000. So that's 26 years on that they've never seen this type of rain like this previously before. Like Spain, in Portugal, more heavy rains are forecasted to hit in the coming days. And also, this is not the only place that is receiving heavy rains and weather. Morocco has also had to evacuate 140,000 people because of severe flooding and rain, which was expected to hit certain areas in the country. So we will definitely be keeping an eye, and as you can see, a number of social media clips online showing the riverbanks. Some of them are at full capacity, other people trying to reach for dry and safer areas in regards to flooding in Spain and Portugal. Okay, those were your headlines for this morning and what we are seeing across the globe. We're now going to take a quick break. When I return, I'll come back with the rest of the global stories for this morning. Stay with us.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. Woo! That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etsy Bar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Etsy Bar, come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here that's been cooking. That is amazing.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenging.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. One important note. To Fierce. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul for A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's take a look at the global stories. Russia and Ukraine have carried out a prisoner swap of 157 soldiers each after US-mediated talks in Abu Dhabi. The US described the exchange as a meaningful step forward in ongoing diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the conflict.
Russia and Ukraine conducted a mutual exchange of 157 prisoners of war each on Thursday, concluding 2 days of US-mediated talks in Abu Dhabi. The total swap of 314 detainees was confirmed by US envoy Steve Witkoff, following the second round of trilateral talks in the Emirati capital. Witkoff noted that such measures reflect the concrete outcomes of sustained diplomatic engagement and contribute to advancing efforts to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. US President Donald Trump sent Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to help bring the sides closer to an agreement. Despite the two sides remaining far apart on key points after several rounds of talks with US officials, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says they're committed to finding a compromise.
The good news is that for the first time in a very long time, we have technical military teams from both Ukraine and Russia meeting in a forum that we'll also be involved with, and our experts. I don't want to say talks alone are progress, but it's good that there's engagement going on. Our goal is to remain committed. We've committed a year to this. We think we've made real progress.
The head of the Ukrainian delegation, Rustem Umarov, said on social media that Kyiv's goal was to achieve a just and lasting peace. He described the negotiations as substantive and productive, adding that the talks focused on concrete steps and practical solutions. In Moscow, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia would not issue any statement on the outcome of the trilateral talks. He said Russia's position on Ukraine was already clear and well understood by both Kyiv and US negotiators. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky followed the talks closely from Kyiv. He posted photos of Ukraine's negotiating team ahead of the new round of meetings. In his nightly address, Zelensky said the talks must lead to real peace.
Partners must be ready to ensure this with real guarantees, security guarantees, and real pressure on the aggressor. It must also be felt now. People in Ukraine must feel that the situation is genuinely moving toward peace and the end of the war, not toward Russia using everything to its advantage and continuing attack.
A previous meeting of the Trilateral Working Group on Security Issues was held in Abu Dhabi in January. It was the first trilateral engagement since the conflict began in February 2022.
However, the two-day high-level talks brought no concrete end to the war in Ukraine. Zelensky said that the next round of talks aimed at settling the nearly four-year-old war with Russia was likely to take place in the US.
Our negotiating team reported today after 2 days of meetings and talks in the Emirates with the American side and the Russian side. I am awaiting the team's return to Kyiv for a comprehensive rundown, as many aspects are impossible to discuss by phone. From what I can already divulge now, further meetings are planned, most likely in America. We are ready to take part in any working formats which can really bring peace closer and make it sound and lasting. Such a peace that deprives Russia from its appetite to pursue the war further.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has apologised to victims of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Starmer says he was misled over the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the UK's ambassador to Washington. The apology comes as police launch an investigation into Mandelson's dealings with Epstein. Mandelson denies any wrongdoing. Our correspondent Zainab has more from Manchester.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is apologising to victims of Jeffrey Epstein after admitting he was misled over the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the UK's ambassador to Washington. Starmer says Mandelson lied to him about the extent of his relationship with the disgraced financier, portraying Epstein as someone he barely knew. Speaking directly to victims, the Prime Minister says he is sorry for what was done, sorry that people in power failed them, and sorry for believing Mandelson's assurances when making the appointment. Mandelson, a veteran Labour figure, was appointed ambassador to the United States in 2024. He was sacked in September after emails emerged showing he remained in contact with Epstein even after the financier's 2008 conviction. The Prime Minister says he was lied to, adding that while it was publicly known Mandelson had known Epstein, the depths and darkness of the relationship was not understood. Newly released U.S. Department of Justice documents suggest Mandelson shared sensitive government information with Epstein after the 2008 financial crisis and include a series of friendly messages pointing to a far closer relationship than previously disclosed. British police are now investigating Mandelson over potential misconduct in public office. Meanwhile, MPs have voted to release documents relating to Starmer's decision to appoint Mandelson, keeping the political fallout firmly in the spotlight. Zainab Farizadeh, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
French President Emmanuel Macron hosted President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa in Paris for talks. The discussions at the Élysée Palace focused on laying the groundwork for an informal leaders' summit scheduled for later this month, with an emphasis on boosting EU competitiveness. The agenda also included security and defence issues, continued support for Ukraine, and broader challenges surrounding European sovereignty. Syrian Foreign Minister Assad Hassan al-Shabani held talks in Damascus on Thursday with visiting French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot. The talks held at the Tishreen Palace focused on bilateral relations, political and economic cooperation, and reaffirmed Syria's unity and territorial integrity. Barrot also welcomed a recent agreement between Syria's authorities and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, saying it supports Kurdish rights and efforts against Islamic State. Over to Japan, and the US President Donald Trump has publicly endorsed Prime Minister Sonai Takaichi just days before voters head to the polling stations this Sunday. The snap general election was called by Takaichi as she seeks a stronger mandate in the middle of a cost of living concern.
US President Donald Trump has publicly endorsed Japan's Prime Minister Sonai Takaichi in a post on his social media platform, Truth Social, just days before the election. Trump described Takaichi as a strong leader and said it was his honor to give her a complete and total endorsement. He added that he'll see her in Washington on the 19th of March. Foreign endorsements are rare in Japanese elections, making Trump's intervention unusual. It highlights the importance of the US-Japan alliance, even as most voters say domestic issues matter more than foreign policy. It comes as voters head to the polls this Sunday for a general election after Takaichi called a snap vote seeking a stronger mandate for her government. The campaign has focused on the cost of living, taxes and economic stability as voters decide whether to keep the ruling coalition in power. But some say they are frustrated with rising prices and tax burdens under the current government.
I'm not satisfied with things. Taxes are deducted too much, and it feels like it's putting real pressure on people's lives.
Others argue Japan needs stable leadership, especially at a time of regional and global uncertainty.
I do support Prime Minister Takaichi. I think stability is important, and she should have more time to lead the country.
The main opposition is the centrist Reform Alliance, led by former Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda. They're also campaigning on cutting taxes and addressing the cost of living, but opinion polls suggest it trails Takaichi's ruling coalition.
The United States is launching a push to build a new trade bloc on critical minerals, seeking to reduce dependence on China and reshape how key materials are sourced and priced worldwide. Here's the report.
The US is rallying allies to form a new trade bloc for critical minerals materials vital to electric vehicles, semiconductors and advanced defense systems. Speaking at a ministerial forum at the US State Department in Washington, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the initiative aims to protect global supply chains from disruption.
We have 55 partners that we're hoping to enter into collaboration with. Many have already signed on, and the goal here is very simple. We all understand that having a reliable global supply chains in critical minerals and processed and finished materials are critical to everything we do. Today, it's heavily concentrated in the hands of one country, and that lends itself to, at worst case scenario, being used as a tool of leverage in geopolitics.
The Trump administration previously launched Project Vault, a federally backed strategic reserve of critical minerals, treating access to these materials as a national security priority. US officials say recent export restrictions and market disruptions have underscored the urgency of securing alternative supplies. Critical minerals are essential for modern technology, but most are processed and refined outside the countries where they are mined, creating supply bottlenecks. US officials say that concentration largely benefits China, which dominates global processing capacity for many critical minerals. Washington argues this gives Beijing significant economic leverage and leaves other countries exposed to export controls, price pressure and political risk.
And I think there's a growing global recognition that we need to have supply chains for critical minerals that are reliable and diverse across the world. Some countries have a number of critical minerals that they have available to them in terms of mining, but just haven't been able to do it because a foreign competitor will come in. They'll gut the price, they'll undercut it through state subsidies and unfair practices, and so it becomes economically unviable to be able to explore for critical minerals.
The proposed block would coordinate investment, production and pricing to keep projects economically viable. US officials say the goal is not to cut off trade, but to reduce reliance on a single dominant supplier.
In East China, villagers have gathered to welcome the start of spring with a ceremony that dates back more than 1,000 years. The ancient Lichun ritual, now recognised by UNESCO as intangibly cultural heritage, is still guiding traditions linked to farming, community and seasonal renewal.
A centuries-old spring ritual has been revived in eastern China, offering a rare glimpse into how ancient traditions continue to shape modern life. In a village in Kuzhou City in China's Zhejiang province, residents gathered on Wednesday to celebrate Lichun, the beginning of spring. The first of China's 24 solar terms and a traditional marker for the start of the farming year. The ceremony dates back more than 1,000 years to the Song dynasty and remains closely linked to agricultural life. It begins with the beating of drums and ringing of bells, followed by rituals to welcome spring, honor the god of spring and parade through the village. Children wave colorful whips while singing rhymes as an elder leads an ox-drawn plow to turn the soil, signaling the first ploughing of the new season and prayers for a good harvest. China's 24 solar terms, a system developed thousands of years ago to guide agricultural production, were inscribed in 2016 on UNESCO's representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity.
Now the countdown is on as the Olympic torch reaches Milan and athletes settle into the Olympic Village ahead of the Winter Games opening ceremony today. With venues ready and competitors eager to begin, Milano Cortina is poised to welcome the world. Here's more.
With just hours remaining until the official opening of the 25th Winter Olympic Games in Italy, the Olympic flame is making its way to Milan. Thousands of spectators lined the route to catch a glimpse of the flame as the Olympic torch began the 60th day of its journey. The torch relay is set to pass several Olympic venues across the city before the opening ceremony on Friday. Final touches are still being made across competition venues, while anticipation continues to build ahead of the opening ceremony. In the athletes' village, national delegations have worked to create the best possible environments for their teams, as the majority of competitors have already arrived in Italy.
It's really good. The field of plays are ready, the villages are ready, all the accommodation are ready, the athletes have arrived, majority are already here, and I think they're happy. It's also a nice feeling to be back in Europe, back home. It's close to Austria, you know. Quite a couple of hours to come here, a short drive, and the athletes are just happy, enthusiastic, be back in traditional environments.
Several events began 2 days ahead of the formal opening. Finn Hoish, a ski mountaineer, said he has already familiarized himself with local conditions.
We are always eagerly watching the webcams and the track. Large parts of the track are already in place. And yes, of course, we try to deduce from the images what the conditions are like, what the corners are like, what the course is like. But I don't think there will be any surprises. We know the course from last year, from the test event.
Meanwhile, crews have been working around the clock to clear snow from mountain roads, and avalanche control operations were carried out in Cortina d'Ampezzo following heavy snowfall over the past few days. Security and logistical preparations intensified with the arrival of US Vice President J.D. Vance in Milan ahead of the opening ceremony. He is leading a US delegation that includes his wife Usha, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the US ambassador to Italy, and several former Olympic champions. The opening ceremony of the Milano Cortina Winter Games is scheduled for Friday night at San Siro Stadium. Nearly 2,900 athletes from more than 90 countries are expected to compete in the Games, which will run through February 22nd.
Over to a quick break now. After, I'll take you through the regional headlines and we'll be joined by an expert in international relations. Don't go anywhere.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenging.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabon. One important note to fears. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, Port News.
Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Let's go through the top news stories of what's happening across the region. And first, now the week has opened with developments that has placed the South Caucasus under close international scrutiny. Azerbaijan President Ilham Aliyev and Armenia Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan jointly received the Zaid Award for Human Fraternity. At the same time, expectations are building around the anticipated visit of US Vice President J.D. Vance to the region, expected to visit here after the Winter Olympic Games. Joining me now to discuss this is Vasif Husenov, Head of Department of the Center for Analysis of International Relations in Baku. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's just get straight into it. My first question, which hopefully you do know some about, is the Baku Military Court has delivered verdicts in the case of 15 detained Armenian individuals. What's your assessment of that particular decision?
This is a very historic moment for Azerbaijani people, because for the past 3 decades or more than 3 decades, Azerbaijani people were suffering from the crimes committed by these people, these criminals. They occupied around 20% of Azerbaijan territories, ethnically cleansing its territories, committed violence and also genocide against Azerbaijani people, particularly in Khojaly. And for the past 3 decades, Azerbaijani people, Azerbaijani society were waiting for this day to hold these people accountable for the crimes they have committed. And finally, this was possible after the Second Karabakh War and also anti-terror operations of Azerbaijan in the Karabakh region in September 2023. We succeeded to detain these people who committed violent crimes against Azerbaijani people over the past 3 decades. And yesterday, Azerbaijani military court finally sentenced these people to several sentences they took, and it is sort of historic moment because it happened after 3 decades of waiting, and therefore it is also important for the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, because it is very important to hold the people who committed crimes accountable in order to push for reconciliation, peace and reconciliation in the region.
Yeah, so it's a good day for that, for justice to be shown that this has actually happened. In that sense, then, you had your recent writing, you frame Azerbaijan's pursuit for strategic autonomy as an adaptation to new global realities. Why has the country taken that approach, and what are those realities?
Azerbaijan is located in a very sensitive region. On the one hand, its geostrategic importance is very big. On the other hand, it brings a lot of responsibilities, particularly to take care of your own national security, because Azerbaijan is located between big empires. I mean, historically they were empires. Now they are great powers, regional powers. They have their own interests in the South Caucasus, in the territories Azerbaijan located. And also, Azerbaijan is a key hub on the way from China to Europe. And therefore, it brings a lot of attention to the South Caucasus, to Azerbaijan, and also some hostile powers are trying to build some influence over the region and over Azerbaijan. And under these circumstances, it's very important for Azerbaijani government to take care of its strategic autonomy and to pursue its national objectives, national interests confidently and on geopolitical stage, on international stage, to present Azerbaijan as a confident, self-standing power. And that's what's happening. Thanks to God, Azerbaijani government has succeeded to reinforce Azerbaijan's geopolitical standing in the South Caucasus, and particularly after restoration of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, we succeeded to overcome the most painful challenge our country was facing after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And now we have full control over our territories. We have full sovereignty over the internationally recognized borders of Azerbaijan, and it brings confidence to more successfully pursue in further national interests, national objectives. And therefore, what I mentioned in the article, the strategic autonomy Azerbaijan is trying to achieve, and to a great extent has already achieved. It's very important for our country.
Yeah, as you mentioned, obviously Azerbaijan is in a very key position in making sure that its security and its future is basically looked after and invested in. I would think that. My next question is, how can Azerbaijan then steer away from external interference? As you highlight in your analysis over the trip corridor route, you talk about there being no, external influences and that we should be able to manage this. How can Azerbaijan make sure that the integrity of the trip corridor route doesn't have any, foreign influences in that area?
Trip corridor is a very important project for peace, prosperity, and also economic integration in the South Caucasus. And not only for our region, but also for wider region, because this corridor is going to be a key passage on the middle corridor, which constitutes a very important transportation passage between China and Europe. But unfortunately, not all countries, not all regional powers view the trip corridor through this lens. According to some politicians, some governments in the wider region, the trip corridor is coming more as a stage of confrontation rather than cooperation. And it is what our people, our country is alarming against, that we should try to preserve this momentum for peace and prosperity in the South Caucasus, which has created by the agreement which Azerbaijan and Armenia achieved in Washington last year in August, and also to promote further opportunities that we already have. Trip corridor is not going to be just transportation passage, it's also a corridor for energy. It's a corridor for fiber optic cables, and therefore it opens up lots of opportunities, and that's what we are trying to seize upon. But as I said, not all countries are viewing this corridor through this lens, and according to some governments I don't want to name, the trip corridor is actually a semi-military base of the United States in the South Caucasus. And if you approach this corridor, this project from that perspective, it creates lots of threats and challenges to peace and stability in the South Caucasus, because we are living just a couple of thousand kilometers away from Ukraine and Middle East, where unfortunately peace and stability has not been achieved yet. And we don't want to transform the South Caucasus into another battleground of geopolitical powers. And that's what Azerbaijani government is sensitive about, that we should try to keep this momentum, to preserve this peace and prosperity, and to use the trip corridor as a platform for cooperation rather than confrontation. And that's what President Aliyev has also mentioned on a number of occasions, that all regional countries, including Russia and Iran, can actually benefit from the trip corridor, because it is not only connecting east and west, but it can also connect north and south. And that's very important for both Russia and Iran in order to more efficiently cooperate in terms of economic matters, in trade relations, and etc. And that's what we want. Both Iran and Russia also view the trip corridor through this lens as a platform for cooperation in the region.
And who will manage that then in that sense? Because you mentioned obviously the benefits of not just the trip corridor to the Middle East, it's also to Europe, it's to China. Who will manage all of that so there's little interference from any type of foreign interference in that?
We should achieve regional ownership. I mean, the countries of the South Caucasus should be in charge of their fate. That's very important. That's what Azerbaijani government also has been promoting since the Second Karabakh War, that the problems of the South Caucasus need to be resolved by the countries of the South Caucasus. And that's what we are trying to achieve. Azerbaijan and Armenia agreed on the participation of the United States in the Zengezur corridor. Now we call it trip corridor, because the United States offered very good opportunities in terms of investments, which is very important, because Unlike Azerbaijan, Armenia was not in the position to invest in the construction of the trip corridor. It has taken a lot of money and it is a very big burden for the budget of the Armenian government. But when the United States offers investments, offers security guarantees, and also it's very important because in Armenia there are still revanchist forces who are against the peace process, peace agenda. And from all these perspectives, the participation of the United States was important as a partner in promoting and in realizing, implementing the TRIP project. But it does not mean that it is becoming sort of geopolitical project in a way that would threaten either Iran or Russia. That's absolutely not true. It's a project that can serve as a platform for cooperation, not only amongst the countries of the South Caucasus, but also amongst the big powers, Iran, Russia, the United States. And here I want to mention one important fact. In the joint declaration, which was signed in August in Washington about trip corridor, there is one article about the participation of other countries, not only the Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the United States, but there is legal perspectives for the participation of other countries, Russia, Iran, and whoever interested in this project, which basically shows that it is not some sort of isolated geopolitical project of the United States or Azerbaijan or Armenia. It is indeed envisioned to serve as a platform for cooperation amongst all interested parties.
Yeah, no, definitely, very much regional. And very quickly, I want to just fit in this last question for you. You described Azerbaijan as an active architect of its own destiny rather than a passive player. Can you further explain what you meant by that and what are the indicators that Azerbaijan is actually, paving its own way?
Azerbaijan has the ambition to act as a middle power, which basically means that it is not sort of small power that can follow the orders of big powers around the South Caucasus or a global stage. It is a regional power that can take care of its own security and also confidently pursue its national objectives, national interests in the region particularly. But Azerbaijan has also started playing a very active role on global stage. Now there are discussions about participation of Azerbaijan in Gaza Stabilization Force. Azerbaijan is now exporting gas to Syria. Azerbaijan is playing a very important role in the energy security of Europe. President Aliyev just mentioned that we are exporting natural gas to 16 countries and 10 of them are in the European Union. It basically shows that Azerbaijan is a country that plays an important role not only in its own region, South Caucasus, but also in wider region, in Europe, in Middle East. And it also brings more confidence to Azerbaijan's foreign policy making because the country has been able to restore its territorial integrity. It was something no one expected to happen because a lot of experts, observers believe that the Karabakh region is under indirect control of some great powers, and that's why Azerbaijan would never be able to take these territories back. But it happened. Why it happened? Because Azerbaijan is indeed acting as a confident middle power in the South Caucasus and in the wider region.
Wow, interesting. Thank you so much for your insights this morning, Mr. Vasif Husseinov. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. We'll now move over to our next story, and talks between the United States and Iran are set to take place in Oman on Friday. US officials say the discussions will go beyond nuclear tensions and include Iran's support for proxy networks across the region. Our correspondent in Tehran brings us more.
The US and Iran have agreed to hold talks this Friday. Both sides confirmed the meeting after disagreement over the agenda and venue. It's now set to take place in Oman. In a post on his X account, Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi confirmed the meeting and also thanked Omani authorities for hosting again the mediating negotiations between Iran and US, which were stalled since Israel-US war against Iran last June. Earlier this week, there were unconfirmed reports that the talks will be held in Turkey with the participation of a number of regional states which are the US allies in the region. The delicate diplomatic effort comes amid heightened tensions as the US builds up forces in the Middle East and regional players seek to avoid a military confrontation that many fear could escalate into a wider war. Differences in recent days over the scope and venue for the talks have raised doubts whether the meeting would take place, leaving open the possibility that US President Donald Trump could carry out his threat to strike Iran. US and Iranian officials said the two sides had agreed to shift the talks' location to Muscat after initially accepting Istanbul. But there was no indication they had found common ground on the agenda. Iran has pushed to restrict the negotiations to discussing its long-running nuclear dispute with Western countries. According to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the US hoped to discuss several concerns beyond the nuclear issue, including discussion on Iran's ballistic missiles and support for proxy networks across the region. A senior Iranian official said, however, that Iran's missile program was off the table. A second senior Iranian official said Tehran would welcome negotiations over the nuclear dispute, but that US insistence on dealing with non-nuclear issues could jeopardize the talks. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
Uzbekistan is preparing to expand uranium production as part of a broader push to strengthen its mining and energy sectors. Our correspondent in Tashkent brings us this.
Uzbekistan plans to begin developing 4 new uranium deposits in 2026 as authorities move to increase production and expand processing capacity. Last year, the country produced about 7,000 tons of uranium, while identified reserves reached 139,000 tons, highlighting Uzbekistan's growing role in the global nuclear fuel market. New projects are expected at the Aynasay deposit in Jizakh region, as well as Western Kizilkok and Southern Jogildi in the Vai region, and Eastern Agron in Samarkand region. Officials say increased extraction will require expanded infrastructure, including new processing facilities and a stable supply of sulfuric acid used in uranium production. A $150 million project at the Aynasay site is scheduled to launch extraction as early as July, supported by construction of more than 68 kilometers of roads and 110 kilometers of power lines. The plans come as Uzbekistan accelerates cooperation in nuclear energy and seeks to strengthen resource security while supporting long-term industrial growth. Authorities emphasize that improving efficiency and ensuring timely project implementation remain key priorities for the sector's development. It is Sivil Vajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
And finally, art and environmental advocacy have come together in Baku as a new international exhibition turns public sculpture into a call for conservation. The show brings endangered wildlife and shared responsibility into the spotlight at the Heydar Aliyev Center.
Using art as a quiet alarm, a new exhibition in Baku draws attention to wildlife and environmental responsibility. The artworks examine coexistence through storytelling and contemporary public art.
On Wednesday, a major exhibition opened at the Heydar Aliyev Center in Baku. The show, The Superheroes of Wildlife, features the recurring figures Rabbit Woman and Dog Man. These characters are presented as companions who symbolize acceptance and coexistence. The creators of the exhibition, British and Australian artists Gilly and Mark, are known internationally for public artworks shown in more than 250 cities. Their practice centres on themes of equality, diversity and wildlife conservation.
I think what's really important is that when people see the wildlife sculptures, they touch the wildlife sculptures, they get up close and they form a connection. And when people connect to wildlife, they will care for wildlife and then want to protect wildlife. And we go around the world studying animals, painting animals and drawing animals. And so all the animals you see in our sculpture are from real life.
You know what? We were blown away when we were invited here. It was our dream to come and exhibit in this amazing center, the Heydar Aliyev Center. And we were just telling someone the story yesterday that 10 years ago, we used to do mock-ups of our sculpture in front of this building, except we didn't know that this building was here. And now today, the dream came true, and our sculptures are in this amazing building, in this amazing country, which we are absolutely loving, aren't we, Mark?
Yes.
It's just beautiful.
Yes.
In his remarks, the director of the Heydar Aliyev Center, Anar Alakbarov, drew attention to the Caspian Sea seals and said that discussions had been held with the artists on creating a work dedicated to the conservation of this species. The exhibition, which will continue for a year, combines sculpture, painting and immersive elements. It focuses on endangered animals and the need for environmental protection. Interactive works are used to raise awareness and support conservation efforts. The project positions public art as a tool for social engagement and global responsibility.
It looks great, doesn't it? Well, it's time for a break. When I return, I'll have a full update on the latest headlines, plus a look at what's making the front pages this morning. Stay with us.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenging.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro,
Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul for A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
And welcome to Prime Time. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Good morning, you're watching Daybreak, and if you're just joining or just tuning in, I'm your host Nadia Jani, and I'll be taking you through the day's top stories. Here are the headlines. Russia and the US agree to resume regular military dialogue after Abu Dhabi talks. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer apologises to Epstein victims over former politicians' lies. And Trump endorses Japan Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi ahead of Sunday elections. Now let's take a look at the story shaping the day across the globe, and we head first to France 24 website here, where Prime Minister, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer apologises to Epstein victims for believing Mandelson's lies. And Peter Mandelson, he was the former ambassador, US ambassador from the UK. This video here is actually Keir Starmer saying these particular words. He says, "I am sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies and appointed him. And sorry that even now you're forced to watch this story unfold in public." Now, an Epstein survivor, Marina Lacerda, said that I have to commend him for going on national television and admitting he was wrong, to apologising for us. So this week we know that the Epstein files was released. For the full redacted, some of the information was redacted, but the full emails and files for the Epstein case was released, and it actually mentioned Peter Mandelson and his connections with the convicted offender financier Jeffrey Epstein. Now he's actually stepped down from the Labour Party since then, and is now a police investigation has been launched into that because of his links and a number of other issues surrounding Epstein and their relationship together while he was still alive. So we'll give you more information as that continues. We now go to our next story. That is now on Al Jazeera, and Christian group says all abductees taken in Nigeria's Kuman released. This is great news for those who have been families who have been waiting for their loved ones for the past weeks. Now we know that all 166 people were kidnapped during an attack on a village and churches in the Kuman in northern Nigeria's Kaduna state have all been released. There's been no further detail on whether a ransom was paid or how the release was secured, but we do know that they are all safe and they are returning home. Just to remind you of what happened, they were snatched from 3 churches during a Sunday service on the 18th of January in the northern part of Nigeria, which is the Kermanwali area, and it was part of the latest wave of mass abductions targeting both Christians and Muslims in Nigeria. Now, these attacks came under heavy international scrutiny because of what was going there in regards to President Donald Trump saying that Christians were being targeted in areas of Nigeria, and the US has recently deployed a small military team as Washington aids Abuja, which is its capital, in its fight against jihadist violence. Okay, we now go to our third headline that is also making its way on the headlines, and that's the BBC, US and Russia agree to resume regular military contact. So this happened yesterday during the 2-day talks that the US, Russia and Ukraine were a part of in order to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. And on the sidelines, it was also agreed between Russia and the US that they'll have military dialogue will be opened up. It's something that President Donald Trump has voiced as his desire to normalize relations between the two countries, and it has been said that they will provide consistent military-to-military contact as the parties work towards lasting peace. And also it's on our A News website, Russia and US to re-establish military-to-military communication there, and more information will come out later on as to what that actually looks like, what that means in regards to regional and international security between the two countries and the sharing of information and intelligence. Well, we now have more information on this particular story as our report shows coming up.
The United States and Russia have agreed to resume regular military-to-military contact, re-establishing a channel that had been suspended since 2021. The agreement was reached during a meeting of senior US and Russian military officers in Abu Dhabi this week, held on the margins of discussions related to the war in Ukraine. In a statement, US-European Command said the renewed dialogue would provide consistent communication between the two armed forces to reduce the risk of miscalculation and unintended escalation. Military contacts between Washington and Moscow were stopped shortly before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Since then, incidents involving aircraft and drones have been reported near NATO airspace, as well as over the Black Sea and Syria. The announcement comes a day after the New START treaty expired on the 5th of February, ending the last legally binding limits on US and Russian strategic nuclear weapons. US President Donald Trump has said the United States should work toward a new arms control framework, while Russia has said it remains open to dialogue. Officials said the restored channel would allow regular communication between senior commanders.
Russia and Ukraine have carried out a prisoner swap of 157 soldiers, each after US-mediated talks in Abu Dhabi. The US described the exchange as a meaningful step forward in ongoing diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the conflict.
Russia and Ukraine conducted a mutual exchange of 157 prisoners of war each on Thursday, concluding 2 days of US-mediated talks in Abu Dhabi. The total swap of 314 detainees was confirmed by US envoy Steve Witkoff, following the second round of trilateral talks in the Emirati capital. Witkoff noted that such measures reflect the concrete outcomes of sustained diplomatic engagement and contribute to advancing efforts to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. US President Donald Trump sent Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to help bring the sides closer to an agreement. Despite the two sides remaining far apart on key points after several rounds of talks with US officials, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says they're committed to finding a compromise.
The good news is that for the first time in a very long time, we have technical military teams from both Ukraine and Russia meeting in a forum that we'll also be involved with, and our experts. I don't want to say talks alone are progress, but it's good that there's engagement going on. Our goal is to remain committed. We've committed a year to this. We think we've made real progress.
The head of the Ukrainian delegation, Rustem Umarov, said on social media that Kyiv's goal was to achieve a just and lasting peace. He described the negotiations as substantive and productive, adding that the talks focused on concrete steps and practical solutions. In Moscow, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia would not issue any statement on the outcome of the trilateral talks. He said Russia's position on Ukraine was already clear and well understood by both Kyiv and US negotiators. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky followed the talks closely from Kyiv. He posted photos of Ukraine's negotiating team ahead of the new round of meetings. In his nightly address, Zelensky said the talks must lead to real peace.
Partners must be ready to ensure this with real guarantees, security guarantees, and real pressure on the aggressor. It must also be felt now. People in Ukraine must feel that the situation is genuinely moving toward peace and the end of the war, not toward Russia using everything to its advantage and continuing attack.
A previous meeting of the Trilateral Working Group on Security Issues was held in Abu Dhabi in January. It was the first trilateral engagement since the conflict began in February 2022.
However, the two-day high-level talks brought no concrete end to the war in Ukraine. Zelensky said that the next round of talks aimed at settling the nearly 4-year-old war with Russia was likely to take place in the United States.
Our negotiating team reported today after 2 days of meetings and talks in the Emirates with the American side and the Russian side. I am awaiting the team's return to Kyiv for a comprehensive rundown, as many aspects are impossible to discuss by phone. From what I can already divulge now, further meetings are planned, most likely in America. We are ready to take part in any working formats which can really bring peace closer and make it sound and lasting. Such a peace that deprives Russia from its appetite to pursue the war further.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has apologised to victims of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Starmer says he was misled over the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the UK's ambassador to Washington. The apology comes as police launch an investigation into Mandelson's dealings with Epstein. Mandelson denies any wrongdoing. Our correspondent Zainab Faridze has more from Manchester.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is apologising to victims of Jeffrey Epstein after admitting he was misled over the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the UK's ambassador to Washington. Starmer says Mandelson lied to him about the extent of his relationship with the disgraced financier, portraying Epstein as someone he barely knew. Speaking directly to victims, the Prime Minister says he is sorry for what was done, sorry that people in power failed them, and sorry for believing Mandelson's assurances when making the appointment. Mandelson, a veteran Labour figure, was appointed ambassador to the United States in 2024. He was sacked in September after emails emerged showing he remained in contact with Epstein even after the financier's 2008 conviction. The Prime Minister says he was lied to, adding that while it was publicly known Mandelson had known Epstein, the depths and darkness of the relationship was not understood. Newly released US Department of Justice documents suggest Mandelson shared sensitive government information with Epstein after the 2008 financial crisis and include a series of friendly messages pointing to a far closer relationship than previously disclosed. British police are now investigating Mandelson over potential misconduct in public office. Meanwhile, MPs have voted to release documents relating to Starmer's decision to appoint Mandelson, keeping the political fallout firmly in the spotlight. Zainab Farizadeh, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Over to Japan, and US President Donald Trump has publicly endorsed Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi just days before voters head to the polling stations this Sunday. The snap general election was called by Takaichi as she seeks a stronger mandate in the middle of a cost of living concern.
US President Donald Trump has publicly endorsed Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi in a post on his social media platform, Truth Social, just days before the election. Trump described Takaichi as a strong leader and said it was his honor to give her a complete and total endorsement. He added that he'll see her in Washington on the 19th of March. Foreign endorsements are rare in Japanese elections, making Trump's intervention unusual. It highlights the importance of the US-Japan alliance, even as most voters say domestic issues matter more than foreign policy. It comes as voters head to the polls this Sunday for a general election after Takaichi called a snap vote seeking a stronger mandate for her government. The campaign has focused on the cost of living, taxes and economic stability as voters decide whether to keep the ruling coalition in power. But some say they are frustrated with rising prices and tax burdens under the current government.
I'm not satisfied with things. Taxes are deducted too much, and it feels like it's putting real pressure on people's lives.
Others argue Japan needs stable leadership, especially at a time of regional and global uncertainty.
I do support Prime Minister Takaichi. I think stability is important, and she should have more time to lead the country.
The main opposition is the Centrist Reform Alliance, led by former Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda. They're also campaigning on cutting taxes and addressing the cost of living, but opinion polls suggest it trails Takaichi's ruling coalition.
Now, staying on this topic, I'm now joined by a guest who knows all about the upcoming elections, Professor Sujiro Takeshita, and he's a professor at the University of Shizuoka in Japan. Welcome to the program again.
Thank you for having me.
My first question really begins with Trump and his endorsement for Sanai Takaichi. Do you think that that sends a positive or negative effect for her campaign and for voters going to polls on Sunday?
It certainly is positive, considering the fact that one of the biggest factor for the Japanese public, the concern, is, of course, as you just reported earlier, economy, etc., but very much security measures as well. We are constantly getting, threat, both physical and a lot of indirect, I would say, pressure from China. And for that reason, I think people would like to have a stronger umbrella, and that is basically a U.S. forces. So, with that kind of, I would say, military pressure that's being opposed against Japan, I think having a very good security relationship with the United States is utmost importance for the Japanese as a whole.
Great, and I think moving on from there, we mentioned, as you mentioned as well, living costs. The rise of living costs and the overall economic pressures has been a point of concern for many disgruntled voters. How can Sanai Takaichi tackle or get around that to appease voters, and how does her fiscal policy deal with that?
That's a very good question, and it's a very tricky one to answer. It's $1 million question, in my opinion, because basically what she's going for is expansion of fiscal policy, which may induce, a lot of people to think that the discipline over the fiscal financial policy isn't going to be there, meaning the yen will weaken. And as you know, Japan has to import virtually all our stuffs, particularly oil, 99%. Our food self-sufficient rate is only 38%. So, all these things that we have to import is going to hit us quite badly. And if the yen is going to weaken on back of this, it's going to be a double whammy. So this is one big headache that, Ms. Takaichi and her regime has to face. But at the same time, she has to take one of the two steps. And at least she's taking the measure to go for expansion of the economic situation, which is totally opposite of what ECB did during the Southern European crisis. And we all know, both theoretically and from the actual point of view, that to expand growth is more important than trying to sustain at the level of debt. So, from that point of view, I think she's going for the right move. And as you basically interviewed the person in the Japanese public there, I think what's really important for the Japanese is to basically halt a little and have a little more patience to see the outcoming effect of her policies.
Definitely, and her party, moving from that, her party made some explicit commitments to lowering Japan's debt to GDP ratio and implementing fiscal reforms. Do you think the Bank of Japan could help with that? There's loads of comments and chatter around, who could help her achieve this? Where's the money going to come from? What can we do? Do you think that could be a possible route?
Well, that's another very good question, because that's another big question that Japan faces all the time. But let me just clarify one thing. And people talk about the debt, and you're absolutely right that we have 260% debt to GDP. But if you talk about that net debt, people tend to forget that we have substantial amount of financial assets. And if you look at that, our debt is basically 100 to 130% of GDP. It's way lower than what most people think. And if you look at, for example, the possibility of default, if you look at CDS, credit default swap premium, Japan is lower than that of the United States. So, of course, it's not something that we should sit back on the couch and forget about, especially considering our demographics, our potential growth rate, etc. But we're not in that kind of a serious state where the country is going for default because of our debt. So, that is being definitely overemphasized and played around too much with a bigger noise. Of course, this is something that we have to look at because, of course, having the bond market being in turmoil gives a very negative connotation for our future. So, of course, that's something that we have to look at.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, concentration to economy is more important.
Definitely. And I want to just fit this question in, if you can really answer it concisely. There's another issue on the surface brewing, and that's the foreign problem in regards to immigration there, and Japan's growing, growing older population as well. How can Sanai approach this rhetoric that a lot of foreigners, they don't want foreigners anymore, they don't want immigration? How can she get around that?
That's another very good question. I mean, this is one thing that she has to tackle, a very, very delicate problem, because we do need more foreign workers coming into Japan. But at the same time, we're witnessing what happened in Europe, and we don't want to regress that same mistake. And there's been a lot of turmoil in this sense. I think what we really need to see is some societal value changes or recognition on that before we go on to the next step, and that is going to take at least a decade, if not more.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Takashita. That's been brilliant. We'll definitely speak to you when we figure out what the results are on Sunday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right now, Latin America's largest contemporary art fair has opened in Mexico, bringing together hundreds of galleries and artists from around the world, from traditional masterpieces to work shaped by artificial intelligence. The Zona Maco is offering a snapshot of where global artists come together and heading for 2026. Here's more.
One of the world's most important contemporary art events is underway in Mexico City as Latin America's largest art fair, Zona Maco, opens its doors to a global audience. More than 240 galleries from across Europe, the Americas and Asia are taking part, presenting works that range from traditional painting and sculpture to experimental photography, textile art and artificial intelligence-driven creations. The fair reflects how global contemporary art is evolving. Organisers say strong early sales point to sustained global demand for art, even as economic uncertainty affects many markets. The fair runs until Sunday, with expectations that attendance will exceed last year's 81,000 visitors.
Iran Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has arrived in the Omani capital, Muscat. He'll be leading direct talks with the US aimed at easing long-standing tensions over Iran's nuclear program. The White House confirmed that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, would join the Oman meetings. The move marks a cautious return to diplomacy after months of escalating confrontations between Iran and the US. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters on Thursday that President Trump is looking to Friday's talks to determine whether a deal can be struck with Iran amid US military buildup in the region.
Diplomacy is always his first option when it comes to dealing with countries all around the world, whether it's our allies or our adversaries.
Let's take a short break. When I return, we'll be joined by a guest. Stay with us.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etsy Bar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here, that's been cooking. That is amazing.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. Now, the Winter Olympic Games officially kick off today, and there has been a lot of preparations to get them to this point. And for the first time, 2 cities are hosting, Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo in Italy. And joining me now to further discuss the Winter Olympics is Anar Bagarov, Chief of International Relations Department at the Olympic Committee of Azerbaijan. Welcome to the program this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Firstly, I just want to say how great it is that Azerbaijan is going to be represented at the Games later on throughout the course. And I just want to find out, what do you think this will do for the country's profile and for a number of teams heading out to the Winter Olympics in Italy?
Yes, first of all, as you just said, Azerbaijan is represented among 93 nations that will be present today at the opening ceremony. That will happen in 6 villages simultaneously, with Milan and Cortina as the main villages and main opening ceremony hubs. But there are total 6 nations, or 6 Olympic villages. So for Azerbaijan, being represented on the Winter Olympic Games is very good sign of development of winter sports in Azerbaijan. And although we have a small delegation, but our athletes are very talented and focused on representing Land of Fire on this Winter Olympics.
Indeed, it's something that we'll be watching very closely as they go. I know they're in alpine skiing and figure skating. But I'm just going to move briefly on to something this week that the IOC president, Kirsty Coventry, called in regards to the Games, saying that it needed to be neutral ground and separate from politics and actions from governments. How do you think geopolitics will play in the Games? Do you think it will be a neutral playing field where everyone is involved and politics does not make its way in?
In this regard, I can say that in today's world that often feels divided, Olympics still remain, it's kind of a rare space for Olympic truce. It's a moment where 3,500 athletes from different backgrounds, religion, political views, they all come together under one roof. And for Azerbaijan, being here means we are also part of the global conversation of peace, excellence, mutual respect. So I think it inspires our youth back home to pick up a pair of skates or skis and realize that there is no peak too high to climb. So I believe this is that we have to focus on.
Definitely. And my final question, just to fit this in, the IOC president also said the Games are a place where people can be reminded of the best of humanity, something that you've also just mentioned. How might that be magnified over the next coming weeks for, those who are competing from Azerbaijan and a number of, as you said, 93 other nations? How can that be magnified, saying that it's a place where the best of humanity is put on stage?
Olympics are always this stage for showcase of humanity, friendship, and excellence in sports, with focusing on sports and promoting these values in Olympic spirit and friendship. So I think it always a showcase of these kind of things. Also, for example, the sustainability that the organizing committee is putting through. So 90% of the venues being used already, they already existed. And also Italy focusing on Green Olympics, using 100% of renewable energy and focusing on circular economy. So I think all of these things and facts showcasing the right things that humanity should focus on.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We will definitely be looking and watching to see how well Azerbaijan does throughout the Winter Olympics. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Bagarov.
Thank you very much, and looking forward to everyone cheering for Vladimir and Anastasia for next 2 weeks in the Olympics.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now let's go beneath the waves and into the big blue, where scientists from an Argentinian-led science expedition spotted a rare phantom jellyfish the size of a telephone pole. Now, this 33-inch sea creature stunned researchers and scientists from the Schmidt Ocean Institute who captured this rare find. Their forearms, which look like long pink ribbons, are used to catch their prey of fish and plankton, according to the institute. The team also documented the largest known Bathelia candida coral reef in the global ocean and discovered 28 potentially new species, including corals, sea urchins, and sea anemones. That looks very majestic. Well, thank you so much for watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani, and for staying with me throughout the whole week. I'll be back on Monday to take you through all of the latest stories and to see how Japan did at the elections and whether or not Takaichi made it through. Thank you so much, and make sure you stay tuned to A News.